Welcome to a Mackenzie Institute Long Talk.
Bill Akerley grew up along the American border, near one of the world's largest Cold War Air Force bases, and that's where he developed a passion for aviation, a passion which he has had to put into practice as an organizer for Ottawa's National Capital Air Show. For more than a decade, he's been responsible for public and media relations. He got his first big test when something went wrong, seriously wrong. People may forget that a wonderful family outing like an air show is also a very dangerous event. I asked Bill what he does to keep people safe.
Well, I think primarily in Canada, you have to take into considerations the ground rules that are set by Transport Canada, by the airport operators. In the case of the air show, which I'm primarily involved with, it's held at an international airport, which operates throughout the air show, so they have their own rules as well. Overall, air shows in Canada are enormously safe. I can't recall, and I don't believe there is on record, a time when a spectator has either been seriously injured or certainly killed by, say, an accident or an occurrence during an air show. Obviously, air shows, much like automobile races, much like powerboat racing and all of those other manifestations, are inherently accident-prone. Because they involve, highly mechanical, extremely expensive, very complex aircraft and machines, and so accidents do occur.
There are cases in other countries where spectators have been killed, and I'm thinking of Ramstein and injuries elsewhere. This must give you pause. This must be in the back of your mind.
It's always a very stressful experience to put on an air show. It's stressful for the organizers because obviously they have to be concerned about the money coming in at the gate. It's stressful for those of us who are involved in dealing with the media, with the public, with the crises as they occur. Yes, of course, whenever an accident occurs here in Canada or elsewhere, and certainly the cases that you described are examples of where spectators have been not only hurt but killed. They are a cause for concern. There is in North America an organization called the International Council of Air Shows, which groups about 250 or 300 North American air shows, and one of their main purpose is to make sure that air shows are safe, that make sure that performers have guidelines, rules to abide by, and they work with Transport Canada and the equivalent in the United States to make sure that there are safety precautions. I think overall, air shows in North America are far safer than air shows that are held in other parts of the world.
On a very simplistic level, I assume the major thing is not having planes flying above where people are sitting.
Exactly, and that's exactly what the rules require. And different types of airplanes have different envelopes within which they can perform. Obviously, if you have a single-engine Cessna-type aircraft, it can appear to perform much closer to the crowd zone than an aircraft that is traveling at 6 or 7 or 800 miles an hour, doing loops or whatever. But yes, people who regularly go to air shows in Canada will notice, for example, that in a flat circle, if an aircraft is performing a flat circle, it is never 360 degrees. It's more likely 280 degrees or so, because that part of the circle which would make the aircraft face directly towards the crowd is eliminated. And that's one of the rules in Canada that doesn't exist.
That was the rule at Ramstein, but when two jets hit each other when they're flying close formation and aerobatics, the jet fuel and the burning plane parts can travel.
Yes.
Is that taken into account?
Well, yes, it is. And I referred earlier to, depending on the type of aircraft, how close it can fly within that crowd zone envelope if you want. And all all of those elements would be taken into consideration in planning that type of show. But of course, accidents do happen, and you have to plan for them. You have to plan on how you're going to deal with it. On the part of, say, the immediate response, whether it's fire, security, ambulances, and so on, and you have to deal with the consequences of having an accident in media planning, in how you respond to the crisis, and how you deal. Obviously, you may very well have 50 or 60,000 people who are literally traumatized as the accident occurs before their very eyes. So you have to deal with that practically on an immediate basis, because they are there. And they're not only there because they happen to be there. They're there as your clients. They've actually paid to come and see this thing. So there's a certain sense of responsibility that you have towards them. And in addition to that, then of course you have to be able to deal with the longer consequences, and whether that's the obvious media follow-up and any kind of investigation or investigative measures that follow, and they always do. It can be anything from a coroner's inquest, obviously in Canada, an investigation by the Transportation Safety Board, any other agencies that may be involved.
Now, you say those 60,000 people may have been traumatized, but on another level, without being too unkind to them, they went there for those sorts of thrills, and some people would say they went there in a way in the hopes of seeing a crash.
I think it's human nature. You're talking about bloodlust, and I don't disagree with the point you make. I think it's human nature to be attracted to these types of events. What you need at that point is an experienced announcer. The person who is doing the description of the air show needs to be able to pull himself or herself back and calm the people, the spectators down, while at the same time reminding them that they must stay where they are, as opposed to trying to jump on the field to impede the work of the rescue workers. All of those things worked for us. What did not work for us was that we hadn't planned on an accident happening in the second day of our first year at a new airport.
You didn't know the route to get from point A to point B, little things like that?
Yes, I think you're absolutely right. And luckily, I found in that instance, as opposed to other instances where I've had to deal with the media, that they were quite sympathetic to our dilemma and very respectful of our need to kind of also step back and deal with the incident, and while at the same time trying to cope with the stresses of the people on site, the stress of having to deal with the media. Obviously, it was a fatal accident, and the family of the pilot were also on site, and we had to deal with that as well. I found the media quite sympathetic, and so they gave us time to step back, to deal with the situation, and then to provide the information which we thought was adequate to them.
In other traumatic events like this, the Challenger explosion, TWA 800, airlines and NASA and others have been chastised and thoroughly criticized for being slow in confirming the patently obvious. The plane has blown up. Everyone is obviously virtually instantly dead. Yet there's a human being at the other end of that criticism who is traumatized himself. Speak to the issue of having to talk to people very quickly, shortly after a traumatic event, under that kind of criticism.
Yeah, you have to be, in the case of the industry with which I'm involved, air shows in particular, the media is generally very good to you. Let's face it, air shows are great television images. Air shows are great newspaper photos. They're wonderful, colorful activities which the media really sucks up. When you have an incident or an occurrence, You have to understand that there's almost a duty to be good to the media because they have been so good to you.
And they can be bad to you.
And they can be bad, and they can be demanding and downright ferocious if you're not feeding them regularly. In one incident I recall, I don't even know where the media came from, but within 10 minutes we were surrounded by microphones, television cameras, photographers, and what have you.
How did that feel?
Well, frightening initially, and then you take a deep breath and you say, I have to be in control here. These people have a right to the information. They expect that they will be provided with the information, but I must maintain control on the scene because I represent this air show, and I have to respect the fact that people are injured, that they are, as we speak, being taken to the hospital, and that generally their families don't know.
You're in news and news management, and on the other end of those microphones for 27 years,
Yes.
and you were frightened?
I was frightened. It was, for me, a scene out of some of the scrums that I see, involving, say, the President of the United States or the Prime Minister of Canada, and it was it was frightening. But then, I mean, you take a deep breath and you say, ladies and gentlemen, this is the information we have. This is what we can give you. There will be no questions and answers at this time. We will, however, hold a news conference as soon as we can, in 60 minutes, 45 minutes, whatever the case may be, and we will try to answer all of your questions there. This is what we know. Thank you very much.
Now, if I'm a radio reporter, 60 minutes is 2 or 3 newscasts from now. If I'm a wire service reporter, that's an eternity.
I suppose if you're a wire service reporter or a radio reporter, and you're really good at what you do, you can try to get the information from other sources. What I'm telling you is that I am the official spokesperson of a given organization, and my role is to control the flow of information to make sure it's accurate, that it's professional, that it doesn't impede whatever investigation or whatever emergency measures may be underway, and that it respects the rights of the families.
I wanted to
of
know
the people
how
involved.
soon he was able to confirm that the pilot was dead, his name, and other details.
In the case of that particular incident, within 60 minutes.
Not much point in delaying that?
No,
Patently
because again,
obvious?
it was, yes, the point is it was obvious, and there was no point in delaying it.
Meanwhile, over in a VIP area,
Yes.
you have the family
Yes.
of that pilot. What do you do with them?
Well, what we did in this particular case, the chairman of our air show went at the within a minute or two of the occurrence, went immediately to locate. In this case, it was the wife of the pilot, to locate her. To be with her through the entire ordeal. She was brought to a room that was quiet and peaceful, where she could, if she wanted to, speak to other members of her family by phone who were in the United States. And in her case as well, we quickly arranged for a charter aircraft to fly her home. And so she was not exposed to the media here, and chose or accepted our invitation to fly home within a couple of hours. She was on her way home.
In 1 or 2 sentences, you've mentioned some very complex logistics involving security, procurement of money, assets, spending of money. How were you able to do all those things so quickly?
Well, oftentimes you don't think of those logistics as they're happening. You have to remember, if you're talking of an air show, obviously, that you have people there who have the ability to call upon, say, an aircraft as a charter, who have friends. Also, the circumstances are such that people are automatically in a sympathetic mood. So if you approach, say, Transport Canada and say, would you have an aircraft available to take this poor woman home because her husband has just passed away, and generally the request is regarded with a sympathetic ear, and you deal with the logistics, the costs, the fuel, whatever it may be, at a later date. In terms of the security aspect of it, the security, providing security to the grieving family, or whatever the case may be. I mean, you indicated there are always in these types of events VIP present, and so there is security available because they're there for other purposes. And again, I mean, they look upon this. This may be a truly Canadian response, but they look on these matters very sympathetically, and are there generally, want to be helpful. I'm thinking out loud when I say it may be a Canadian response.
The principle of isomorphic learning says that we can learn from other people's disasters, even if it was a different company, a different culture, a different time. What was the difference between the Challenger and the Titanic? Very similar events, really. Why were there 37 years between the Iroquois Theater fire in Chicago and the Coconut Grove nightclub fire in Boston? Very similar events, but we didn't learn. If you were going to manage an air show, you wouldn't think to figure out what to do if people get hit by lightning.
Correct.
However, that's exactly what you had to find out about one time.
Yeah. A few years ago, on the air show site, as shortly after the gates opened, there was an extremely violent storm. As human beings do, people seek shelter in storms. In this case, under the wings of an aircraft, which, at the height of the storm, was struck by lightning.
The only worst place would be under a lightning rod, one assumes.
Yes, and an aircraft in a violent storm is a pretty good lightning rod.
Were they badly injured?
There were 4 people who were injured. One, in fact, went into cardiac arrest on the scene. Was luckily, air shows are planned with security and safety as a very first element. So you have on the site an increased presence of ambulance personnel, of doctors, of nurses. They are there to deal with circumstances. In this case, the one person who went into cardiac arrest was revived on the site by a nurse who happened to be nearby as an airshow volunteer. Was transported, or in the process of being transported to the nearest hospital, went into cardiac arrest again, was revived by the paramedics, was in a coma for several days, and now is just walking around fine with some burn scars from a chain which was worn around the neck at the time of the strike. The other 3 people were a little bit further away from the aircraft, and they certainly were knocked to the ground, were taken to the hospital, were released a day or 2 later. In that incident, I found the media to be far more aggressive in its desire for information.
Even though you didn't cause the lightning?
Even though we didn't cause the lightning. I think the media, as you know, has various methods of obtaining information. In this case, they were monitoring police, ambulance communications. When a person is in cardiac arrest, that information is communicated to the ambulances that are speeding to the scene. The assumption, certainly by some of the media, was that the person had died. And as the media descended on us, wanted us to confirm that the person was no longer alive.
And you and he did not want to do that.
Precisely. Whether the person was dead or alive, we would not have confirmed it at that point in time. But he was, in fact, still alive, and the media, having heard the ambulance calls and the police calls, simply would not believe them when we told them, yes, in critical condition,
now,
yes,
isn't it
in
true that if
hospital,
you have a
no,
good
not.
plan to deal with heat prostration, which you could well expect at a summer air show,
Yes.
Lightning, which you might not, an elderly person having a heart attack, which you might well expect, then you can probably deal with a crash or a terrorist incident or a hostage taking or all kinds of things that might require medical attention, security, evacuation, and so on. Is that right?
Yes, indeed. And interestingly enough, you need to rehearse those things. You need to rehearse circumstances because not oftentimes, but occasionally you can get caught. You can let yourself be caught in a situation which has the potential to spin out of control. Let me give you an example. On one or two occasions in recent years, there have been demonstrations planned against the air show. Some groups believe that air shows promote war.
Use too much fuel, bad for the environment, like car racing does. They have protesters as well.
Right. When you get woken up at 5:30 in the morning by a radio reporter who says, "What a wonderful day for an air show. We would like to talk to you on air about it." You assume that the discussion will deal with the fact that it's a wonderful day for an air show, that thousands of people will appear at the gates, that everybody will go home happy. And once you go on air and the reporter says, "There's a demonstration plan because some people say you guys promote war, what do you think?" If you haven't prepared, and it's 5:30 in the morning and you're still half asleep, you can get yourself caught truly seriously. Luckily, one can practice appropriate responses to those types of questions, and amazingly enough, even when you're half asleep, they come to you, and you can deal with the unexpected. And it's very easy to plan. There are all types of resources out there, whether in the case of a lightning strike, it's from Environment Canada, and they do have information available as to how you deal with it, how you try to avoid it, how whether it's information that you can get from other air shows in this case that have had to deal with similar situations. And if you plan, and if you discuss with your key people how you're going to deal with any situation, then you can deal with it. It may be traumatic, it may be difficult to deal with, it may be enormously stressful, but it builds within you a certain level of confidence that you know that you can deal with, that you will remain in control, that you will be fair, accurate in the information that you pass along, and that you'll be respectful of those who may be victims or who may be affected by whatever the situation is.
Air show enthusiast and media relations director Bill Akerley.
Any views expressed here are not necessarily those of the Mackenzie Institute, its speakers, sponsors, or supporters. But the Institute is dedicated to fostering public discussion, debate, and education about security matters. Google the Mackenzie Institute to join the discussion. The Mackenzie Institute is grateful to its sponsors and supporters. Some of our short pods and long talks are a result of the support of Heathbridge Capital Management Limited, the National Post, and Dundurn Publishing.